This week on Back the Grid, we're going to be talking about maybe the biggest news story there's ever been in F1. That's right, Haas have got a new livery, and also a driver's moved teams or something. Hello everyone, welcome to Back of the Grid. I'm Chris, joined again by Stu, he's back.
Hi.
And Tom's here as well.
Hello.
And Tom's here.
And I'm here.
Yeah, that was a bit dismissive, wasn't it?
I'm always here. It's a given at this point.
It's Sunday, it's the daytime, we're recording a podcast, everything just feels weird.
Yeah.
Does anyone else feel like they've had a sort of fever dream over the last few days? Like, it's been the most bonkers few days for F1 news.
It's every time I go skiing, something. Like, I remember, like, I was skiing when, I was snowboarding when Mercedes released, like, the side podless car. And everyone, like, I didn't have much internet because I'm on a mountain. And you can't see what's going on. It's just like, whoa, what kind of thing. You really want to
you always come back like,
your
miss
holiday
anything?
Yeah.
Like,
and then, this, I mean, the world's just gone mad. The world is mad right now.
Yeah.
I think in Formula One, like, it's crazy. There's two massive pieces of news for this episode that I have real opinions about. So
Opinions
I'm excited
will
to
be
get into
flowing.
this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to start with Lewis Hamilton's joining Ferrari. That's not a sentence I ever thought I would say. Like, it's something that's always been like talked about as a kind of, wouldn't that be fun in a parallel universe kind of thing. And it still feels weird to be saying as a fact.
It's bizarre. And I say this a lot about things that happen in Formula One, but I think for the first time, like, saying it's bizarre for this is probably the most bizarre thing to ever happen, I think, in Formula One. Like, I just can't. It kind of came out of nowhere, and even now, even days later, I still can't fathom like how this has come about and some of the logic. So hopefully, between us in this episode, we can kind of figure some of this out and sort of make sense of it all.
The fact that it happened so fast as well, like, I was waiting for a train at about 9 a.m. when I first saw, like, there's this rumour circling around. And by 7 p.m. the same day, it was all confirmed. Like, to go from no inkling of it to confirmed in, like, what, 10 hours?
I honestly, when you guys were messaging me about it, I honestly thought it was just going to blow over and just be a load of clickbaity nonsense. I thought, here we go again. Quiet news in Formula One at the moment. Someone's looking for some clicks.
Because it always has been one of those stories, hasn't it? It's like, oh, it's a bit quiet at the moment. Let's just wheel out the Hamilton to Ferrari news story again, because that just fills the page.
The week before, you obviously had the stuff where Carlos and Ferrari were both like, no, we're kind of close to a deal, but we've not really come to agreeable terms yet, but we're working on it. Like, it felt like it was just something that someone at Ferrari had kind of just almost fed the press to, like, add some weight behind, look, Carlos, you need to sign this lower deal because Lewis is coming. Yeah. Like, you know, just to kind of not bully him into a worse deal, but like just put some weight behind their side of it. And
no, totally.
So I sort of thought, yeah, it's probably one of these things. It's like, it's negotiation tactics or whatever. It's contract tactics. And then
it was F1 stirring the pot to distract from
all that.
Another big bit of news which we'll talk about today.
Yeah, but the Andretti thing,
Yeah, I think like when you got like the likes of Motorsport and like, you know, the sort of reputable sources that don't publish the clickbait nonsense, I sort of started thinking, oh, maybe there's a bit of weight to this. And then you had the whole thing where there was like a some sort of rumor going around or whatever, some sort of hearsay that Mercedes were like looking to do a press conference at 2, and then when that didn't come, I was like, oh, maybe it is rumor, and then it eventually came at 7. It was just like,
and Mercedes, then there's the meeting with all this Mercedes staff as well. Everyone gets called into a big
Mercedes sort of desperate to get it out there before Ferrari did officially. Of like, well, thanks, Lewis, the journey's over, before Ferrari get to go, look who signed for us. Yeah. Crazy day.
Let's get into it.
It's happening. So 1 year into Hamilton's current 2-year deal, he has decided to leave Mercedes, joins Ferrari on a multi-year deal from the beginning of 2025. Obviously, there was a release clause in his contracts that he has chosen to activate. It can't have been performance related because this year's car hasn't even turned a wheel yet. So he'd obviously put some other clause into his contract that let him just leave as and when he chose to, I guess, which is what he's activated.
I mean, it could quite easily be like, if a certain team comes knocking, and Mercedes put that in of like, well, it's not going to, like, banking on that's not going to happen. Almost
I think a lot of drivers
like footballers and like NFL, like certain players in certain sports have those kind of clauses, don't they? If a certain team puts in an offer for me, part of my contract is you have to accept it and let me negotiate with them. So
it makes sense.
Wouldn't surprise me if it was something like that.
My
if it's a specific team. So maybe it was something like that. Maybe.
Could have been.
So I guess a good place to start is why? Like, why has Hamilton decided this is A, the moment to leave Mercedes, and B, the moment to join Ferrari? I mean, I don't think there's one answer to that, but I think there's a lot of factors involved. It's obviously it's up there with the biggest decisions he's ever made in his career. I still think the McLaren to Mercedes move was a riskier one at the point he made that in his career. And obviously that paid off extremely well for him. So I don't think this is as risky a move, but it's as big a choice he's made.
I think it's a huge choice. So I think there is probably a small element. I think based on like what the sounds coming from the Hamilton camp over the last sort of year or two, he has seemed more and more dejected with F1. There's been the odd comment here and there about him not being particularly happy about the way Mercedes are running the car, the way the design direction they're taking with the car. He famously said something along the lines of "I told you so" about something to them, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Further, way back at the beginning of 2023, I think it might have been, and where he was, I think that the whole thing about him being sat too far, without getting into the weeds, the whole thing about him being sat too far forward in the car, and then you hear James Allison saying, it doesn't really make a difference where you're sat in the car. If you've got the right feeling from the car, then where you're sitting shouldn't matter. So to me, I feel like there's like a little undertone there of like disagreement between them, which maybe
like a disconnect.
A bit of a disconnect that might have been rumbling along for a long time that no one really necessarily knew much about. When you look at where Mercedes have been this last 2 years, last year they won a race. In 2022 they won in Brazil, didn't they? Even though it wasn't Hamilton who won in Brazil, it was Russell who won in Brazil.
Yeah.
But Mercedes did win a race, and this year they haven't really looked like winning a race other than maybe at Circuit of the Americas, where they kind of gifted the win to Red Bull anyway, and then they were disqualified for being too low. So I think there are a few reasons for him to potentially be losing a bit of faith in Mercedes at this point in his career.
Yeah. A lot of people have pointed to a guy called Loic Serra, who I believe is performance engineer at Mercedes, but he is leaving Mercedes to join Ferrari next year as well. And how much truth there is to this, I don't know, but I've seen a lot of people point to, at this point in time when Hamilton was saying one thing about the car and the technical team was saying the opposite, that Loic Serra was kind of the one guy on the engineering side that was kind of on Hamilton's side in those discussions and thought that he should be the one that they were listening to, not just being, we're the engineers, we know what we're talking about. So that could easily be a factor. I also just think Mercedes aren't the team they used to be. Like, a lot of both big and unknown names have left that team in recent years. Like, obviously Paddy Lowe was a huge part of it. He left. James Vowles was also a huge part of that. He's not there. There's quite a big list of sort of top names that have left in recent years. Red Bull Powertrains poached a huge percentage of Mercedes staff to go and set up their powertrains department. Up and down the grid, there are ex-Mercedes staff now at other teams. And I think there has been a little bit of brain drain at that team, and they're maybe not the kind of, from a personnel point of view, the sort of powerhouse they used to be in the kind of winning, 7 or 8 titles in a row era.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that to it, I think. And I mean, ironically, we talked about it very briefly at the end of the last show, Chris. Like, you know, I think a move to Ferrari for Hamilton has always been on the cards somewhat. Like, he's always wanted to maybe go there before he completely retires. And if they've approached him with a a decent enough offer to go there now, I mean, I didn't think they would do that whilst they had Leclerc. I didn't think that they'd want those two drivers side by side. And it was maybe for if things ever went sour with Leclerc or Leclerc decided to move on, whatever, that's when they'd approach Hamilton to take like that seat, not Sainz be the one that's kind of pushed out. But yeah, like I think it's always been something he's wanted to do for a long time. It's just a case of I mean, even Toto Wolff was quoted as saying something along the lines of like, we always knew this would come, but we didn't expect it to be, this soon. And I probably agree with that. Like, I kind of always seen it coming, but just nowhere near. It's like, I was thinking like maybe, I don't know, once he's 40 or something. Like, how old is he now? He's late 30s.
But he will be 40.
Yeah, he'll be 40
there you go, then.
When he joins. So
there you go then.
maybe you were right there, but
inadvertently right.
Yeah, I think the really interesting side of it for me isn't necessarily him going to Ferrari. Is just okay. He's going to Ferrari. Nice one, great, good for him. I never expected it, but okay, interesting that you've made that decision. What is interesting to me is Ferrari. Like, what is the deal with Ferrari? Like, how has he looked at Ferrari over the last 2 seasons and seen their stories play out and track and thought, oh, I want a piece of that? Other than like their car being like a bit better than everyone else, but not everyone else's, but like competing probably more than anyone else with the Red Bull towards the end of last season. Their strategy last few years, Ferrari's strategy has been, in fact, as long as we've ever been recording this podcast, Ferrari's strategy has been abysmal. And how can you look at that? No matter how fast their car is, when you look at that, you can be you could be Max Verstappen, go to that team, you won't be winning races because the strategies never play out for them. They don't.
I think I see 2 answers to that. I think the first part is John Elkann, who's the CEO, chairman. He runs Ferrari basically. Him and Lewis have been friends for a number of years, apparently. And I feel like as soon as he got an inkling that Lewis was maybe considering leaving Mercedes, it sounds like he's just thrown everything he wants at him to get that deal signed. But I think a bigger part is Fred Vasseur. I think if Fred Vasseur wasn't running Ferrari, there's no way this would have happened. But Fred Vasseur now basically has got in 2 drivers. He's 2 big kind of proteges from when he was in
F2,
GP2 in feeder series. Yeah, like Leclerc and Hamilton were both brought up through feeder series by Fred Vasseur. So
now the other thing that's interesting as well, without jumping the gun maybe, but like the other thing is like the Leclerc v Hamilton aspect of this is really interesting because we're finally going to see if Leclerc is any good. I think, if he beats Hamilton, then I will stop calling him the most overrated driver in the history of Formula One because you'd have to be. I don't think Hamilton will be too worried about Leclerc, but
I don't think he will.
I don't think there's really anyone other than possibly Max that would worry him on that grid. I think he would maybe feel. I could see him like looking over his shoulder a bit and like thinking, I've got to get the most out of this 24/7 if he was in a car alongside Max. But I mean, Alonso never bothered him. Obviously, George being like the young sort of new hot thing for Mercedes has never bothered him. Like he just, I can't see Leclerc bothering him that much that it'd get in his head.
It's going to be so interesting to see how they stack up against each other.
Yeah, I think Leclerc might fall apart completely. I think this could ruin Leclerc's career.
Well, I mean,
it definitely could.
Yeah, I think if if there was someone going to get rattled in that team once Hamilton moved, it's going to be Charles, isn't it? It's like
I think when
you look at the pressure of having to compete, yeah.
The opening of 2022 when Leclerc, when he just crumbled under the pressure against Verstappen, there were so many mistakes from Leclerc when he finally got that opportunity to maybe start thinking about fighting for a championship. Of course, the rest is history. It never really worked out for Ferrari or Leclerc throughout that season. And there were definitely moments of huge brain fade, I think, from Leclerc during that, particularly in France, where he just lost the rear, going around the final corner in France, end up in the barrier under his own heavy right foot, it looked like. And, that was pretty widely agreed, wasn't it? That it was very much driver issue rather than car issue in the end.
Yeah.
And you just don't see Hamilton really until recently making those kinds of mistakes. So another aspect of this is like the car, like is the Ferrari, we've seen like world champions go to Ferrari and then suddenly just not be anything like as prolific in the car as what they were in their previous teams, like is there something, this is going to answer so many questions for us because we're finally going to see if it is the Ferrari car and something at Ferrari that's just causing problems for drivers, because Hamilton's one of the most adaptable, one of the best drivers, in the history of the sport. And if he goes there and can't do an amazing job, then no one can, I think. It'll just explain everything about all the other amazing drivers that have gone there. And, Vettel, Alonso came close to winning world championships there, but never quite managed it because that was during the Red Bull domination era, the early Red Bull domination era.
Vettel.
I'm just so fascinated by this whole thing. I'm kind of like skipping over to 2024 now and just coming back in 2025 to see what's going to happen, because this is just going to absolutely transcend the entire season.
Yeah.
The main thing I care about in 2024 now is finding out who's going to be driving where in 2025.
Yeah. It's so strange.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I guess the other factor to him moving now is who's he going to take with him. Yeah. Like a lot of drivers will take their race engineers with them. Are we going to see Bono heading over as well? I mean, looking at the way the Ferrari pit wall works compared to the Mercedes pit wall, I can see if Bono going there and aging about a decade in the first 6 months of him being there, like that's going to be an interesting change if he does do that.
I think that's part of the only way, coming back to like Ferrari strategy and Ferrari operations on race weekends and execution during races, I think the only way you're agreeing to go to that team is if you can bring your own guys in for your race direction, your race strategy, and all that kind of thing.
Although,
and you're going to want, based on what you've seen over the last few years, you're going to want some guarantees about like what's going on in the strategy department. Why have these things happened? You want some explanations before you sign up to this.
It has been getting better though. Like second half of last season, I don't remember us really talking about many Ferrari howlers. Like I do think under Fred Vasseur is gradually improving in that side of things. But like they must have made some kind of guarantees to him about operationally. And also like the plans for 2026, like the new regulations, like that's got to be a big part of this as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it's similar in a way, I guess, to the Mercedes move you talked about originally, like where, there must be some, like, we know full well that the potential that he saw in the Mercedes stuff when they were trying to poach it from McLaren. I would imagine that there's something similar that they've essentially been able to show him the potential for what's going to be going on from 2026 onwards.
I think so.
Because he's not, I mean, he's clued up in that area, isn't he? He's not going to make that kind of decision without the info to kind of not verify, but like give him some confidence in that it's going to be a challenging car.
Have a feel for that kind of stuff.
Well, I think as well, when you look at Hamilton's track record for his moves, fair enough, there's only been really one really huge move, but like when he started at McLaren were the dominant team. McLaren and Ferrari were the two dominant teams in Formula One at that time. Then he moved to Mercedes just before they became the dominant team of that era. And I've no reason to believe that he's not making informed decisions in these moves. Like something, he knows something. That's why he's making the move, right? Like he's got a track record of getting it right in the past. So there's no reason to think he can't achieve 3 out of 3 and get it right again.
Yeah.
Another wild thing in this is that Ferrari's last drivers' champion was in Hamilton's first year in Formula One.
Yeah.
And now he's found his way there all these years later.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. I would.
There's like a really beautiful poetry to it, isn't there? Like,
I would love so much for him to go there and win a title for them after spending basically like most of his career fighting at one time or another against Ferraris, for him to then go there and win a title for them.
Yeah, it's like he's turned to the dark side. Like it's literally like, it's just so crazy. I love it so much. The only problem is now we're all going to have to become Ferrari fans because like the best British driver is a Ferrari driver.
Team LH tie themselves in knots over this has been hilarious.
Oh yeah, with their angst for Ferrari in the past.
They're all like, I guess I'm the Tifosi now.
Yeah. Team Tifosi.
This is so funny.
Oh, it's going to be wild.
I mean, it's interesting. Can you be a Hamilton fan and not a Ferrari fan now? Or do you have to be both?
Of course you can. Like, you can support a driver without fully embracing the team.
Is that what Twitter thinks? Is Twitter going to allow people to do that? Or
I mean,
will they be mobs in the streets going door to door?
Oh, it's basically the apocalypse now.
Yeah,
it already is that. You can't, like, I don't know, you can't say anything good about Red Bull without Twitter just, like, dumping on you. So,
do you know what's going to be really
Nor can you you can't say anything good about anything on Twitter without someone dumping on you.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially in Formula 1.
Yeah. One thing I've just realised that's going to be really strange is going to Silverstone and the crowd being a sea of red.
Yeah.
That's never been a thing.
But will it? Because
I think it will.
If this doesn't come off, if this is all kind of like, bluster and Mercedes suddenly have a really good car next season, is he then going to worm his way out of like the Ferrari contract? Come back to Mercedes?
Well, yeah, like is this the point where the kind of, let's say, like the national fan base of like, I support this driver because they're British and I'm British, is this the turning point where you see that shift more towards someone like Lando or something like that? Because, like, I'm not saying people in Britain don't like Ferrari as a team, but like stereotypically it's always been like you said, the Brit driver driving for somebody else against Ferrari in some capacity, basically.
In recent years, yeah.
I mean, you've got to go back to John Surtees, maybe?
Was he Irish or Northern Irish?
He's Irish. Irvine.
Irish, yeah.
Okay, so you can't count him as British then, because anyone in Ireland listening to this will just...
I think Nigel Mansell was the last
British Mansell, of course.
He drove Ferrari.
Yeah.
Didn't win a title there, but still drove there. But again, like in that era, I sort of personally, I kind of forget that Mansell went there. I always remember Mansell as like a Williams driver, for example. Do you know what I mean? And so I wonder if this is kind of, like I said, that point where the new generation of Brit drivers suddenly get like a bit of a boost in their followings because less people want to kind of make that shift to Ferrari to support Lewis still. I don't know.
Let's not forget that there are plenty of Ferrari fans in the UK.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not
going around with like Ferrari clothes on.
It's not like they don't exist, but it feels like a lesser supported team here when you compare it to the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull. I would say
I don't think that'll be the case in 2025. I think
that's what I think is going to be. That's what I think is going to be really interesting. Is like I say, how many people make the switch for the driver and. I said, don't care about the team.
I suspect that first run of Ferrari merch with number 44 on it, they will not be able to make fast enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what'd be interesting is if he'll get as many, this is like just going really weird tangent, but will he get as many like of the custom special caps? Because Ferrari don't really do that kind of thing. Ferrari, it's a Ferrari cap with your name and number on it, and that's about it.
Well, here we go then. This is where it gets kind of interesting for me. I think the brand that is Lewis Hamilton, and like all the fashion-y things that he does. Ferrari is so far behind with all that stuff. There's nothing really cool about Ferrari team gear. There's nothing, they're not doing anything particularly special with any of like the design work for any of the t-shirts or hats or anything like that. So I think definitely he's going to have an impact on some of that sort of stuff. Like he's going to bring them into probably into the new age, into the 21st century kind of thing. And I think like that stretches further than just team gear. I think like it does make Ferrari kind of like a slightly cooler brand, because globally he is seen as a pretty cool dude. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because with Ferrari, it's always very much been Ferrari comes first.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
As a driver, you're kind of second fiddle, whereas Hamilton is very much the brand. So
is that going to change? Suddenly, is it like, who's bigger, Hamilton or Ferrari? Who is bigger?
Guess we're going to find out.
Yeah. And like, how does that work? Like, do they clash heads, and does it just turn into a really toxic, horrible relationship, or do they work together and become a mega brand?
It's
so many questions.
Many layers to it.
So many layers. It's so interesting. I love it.
It's so exciting. This is the most excited I've been for anything Formula One related in like a couple of years at least.
This has made me like interested in Formula One again.
Reinvigorated. So I guess the next question is the enormous gaping void that Hamilton is going to leave behind at Mercedes, and who they put in that seat for 2025.
Yeah,
because we already knew that this driver market was going to be crazy because so many contracts run out this year.
This has left a gaping hole in Mercedes. Like, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton are intrinsically linked. So the hole they've got left to fill isn't just that of a driver. It's a brand ambassador. It's it's a designer. It's all these other different things, all these different dynamics that they had together. I'm pretty sure he's like, Hamilton's a bit of isn't he a shareholder in Ineos or something? Or he's got some relation. Obviously, he's got strong connections to the.
It would surprise me if he didn't
with Toto Wolff. So there's been talk of him like buying into Manchester United with Ratcliffe with Ineos Group at some point in the future. So there's definitely like an ownership connection there on some level, whether it's of the team or not, who knows? But there is definitely like a high level management connection. That's all gone. That's all obviously going to have to go away. You can't be a driver for one team and then have an ownership stake in another. Like, that's just such a huge conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So yeah, who could possibly fill that hole?
So I guess the easiest option in many ways would be a straight swap with Carlos Sainz.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see Mercedes wanting Sainz? Like, a Sainz and Russell driver pairing doesn't sound terrible on paper, but
I think Russell is in a good position to be number one driver at that team at the end of this season after Hamilton. He might even beat Hamilton. He beat him last year. He might beat him this year. It depends how good the car is. Because if Hamilton obviously I can't see this year Hamilton spending loads of time improving the car at the expense of his own championship like he did in 2022. So I think we're going to see a real battle between those two this year, because before they've been quite cooperative, Hamilton and Russell. And I think now there's like less reason to, there's much less reason for Hamilton to do really much improvement to the car if it's not firing out of the blocks in the first place and he's fighting for a championship. So that will definitely be a battle, and it'll either make or break Russell. Russell needs to have the season of his life, I think, this year, because Formula One contracts, they're not really worth the paper they're written on, are they? Like you just look at Hamilton's break clause in his contract that has got him out of this into Ferrari before he's even engaged in the contract in the first place.
Yeah.
Russell Sainz would Sainz? Yeah, how long is Russell's contract?
He's there until the end of 2025.
Okay, so he probably would be. You'd put Russell number one driver, I think, in that team, unless you get like. I think no matter who you get, I think Russell's going to be number one driver there.
I mean, this is it. This is Russell's chance, right? Like, Russell's always been there to go and sit alongside Hamilton for a few years, learn from him.
Pick up the mantle.
pick up the mantle. Yeah, so this is it. This is his chance to do that.
Yeah, this is the transition year for Russell. Who's going to be alongside him? So you've got Sainz written down. That would be a simple swap.
Bad choice. I mean, I guess we can get a little bit after this into other options for Sainz. I mean, in theory, Ocon should be on the shortlist. He's still managed by Toto Wolff and some Mercedes people. In reality, I really can't see them going for Ocon.
He would be a very distinct number 2 driver, I think.
Yeah. And I don't think he'd like that one bit. Like, we all know Ocon's history of not playing nice on track with teammates.
Yeah. That's just not going to work for Mercedes.
It's not going to work.
No.
Toto Wolff has spent the last couple of years telling everyone that Mick Schumacher very much deserves a Formula One seat. So, in many ways, this should be his opportunity to put his money where his mouth is. But I also cannot for a second see that happening.
Yeah. Oh, he deserves a Formula One seat, but not a Mercedes.
Not this
one. Not this one.
Not this Formula One seat. Different.
I said a seat, not this.
A seat.
How do we feel about Albon?
I mean, I think it could work. Him and Russell get on really well. Generally speaking,
I don't think Russell would be too intimidated by him.
No, I think they get on well enough that they could probably work together to build a car, like together essentially. And we've seen the performance from Albon in the last couple of years with the Williams. Like, I mean, he had flashes and potential even before that, which is why he kind of did manage to work his way up to the Red Bull. And to be fair, probably a little bit hard done to getting booted out of the Red Bull.
Yeah, I think so.
But like he was one of the better second drivers that Red Bull had through this period where they've kind of chopped and changed constantly.
Oh, he should still be at Red Bull, man.
Yeah, I don't think they should have ever gotten rid of him.
Perez should never have replaced him.
Yeah.
It's
but
bonkers to me that even happened.
Yeah, so like, I mean, he came close to some, decent podium finishes and even close to wins if it wasn't for incidents and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the list in reality for Mercedes probably looks something like Sainz, Albon, and maybe Schumacher's a backup if they can't work out anything with either of those two. I mean, there's obviously Antonelli, like there's long-term goals for Mercedes to keep developing him and get him in the car after the reg changes. So
yeah,
there's always a risk.
I think Antonelli's going to Williams. I think if you're going to...
Should we grab an inbox question to lead
Go.
into this, actually, so we don't repeat ourselves? So from Grey Bearing says, hey man, if Kimi Antonelli dominates or comfortably wins F2 this year, what do you think the chances are he'll be promoted straight to the second Mercedes seat? Someone at the race claimed he was significantly faster than anyone else in an F2 test, but couldn't find anything in that to verify. Would you feel bad for George if Kimi was promoted straight away and he really is the next Hamilton or Verstappen?
No, I wouldn't feel bad for him.
I mean, no, that's just the sport, isn't it? If the kid's skillful enough to do it and got the talent to do it.
Antonelli is the kind of looming spectre over this, in that the general feeling is that he has potential to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
Mercedes are going to have to find him an F1 seat sooner or later because another team will just snap him up if they don't.
Yeah. I get the suspicion, obviously, there's a lot of factors in this, but I get the suspicion that you might see something like the Albon move happen and them finding a way for Antonelli to replace Albon at Williams as like a nurture, get him on the grid and strike some kind of deal of, look, we want Albon, we want to get him out of contract with you, but after this season, when it all goes down, Antonelli will come to Williams as a junior, probably.
Which puts Mercedes in a difficult spot now, because if you were Sainz, Albon, whoever, are you really going to want to sign a deal to go and drive a Mercedes for a year, 2 tops, knowing your replacement is already sat there on the grid?
I suppose it depends, doesn't it? Because that is very much factored on Antonelli being being the talent that we expect him to be.
I mean, I'm just looking at his racing record now, and it's pretty damn good.
It's pretty good.
He is really good.
I mean,
But we're also
Lance Stroll won Formula Europe, so junior results don't always mean everything.
True.
If you could see this list, he's just won everything.
No, mate, he has basically like won pretty much every series he's been in. Like he's done, he did a lot in karting, didn't he? Won a lot in karting, and then he's done. Where did he do his Formula 4? Was it Europe or was it? It was Italy, wasn't it? It was the Italian one.
I think then he's done a few different Formula regionals.
Yeah, and then he's done some stuff out in the Middle East, hasn't he? As well. So like he's won all that stuff that he's been in. He's going to be really interesting. Go on.
His sort of there is a season hasn't gone by where he hasn't, since more or less when he started racing. A season hasn't gone by when he hasn't won something.
Yeah.
More or less.
Mad that we've ended up in a situation where we're talking about someone who's not done anything higher than Formula Regional currently about potentially being in an F1 seat in the next few years. But,
well, I mean, the last time that probably happened was Verstappen.
Yeah,
I would say
exactly.
the last time it was talked about in a serious conversation was probably Verstappen.
I would go as far as to say, if you're Max Verstappen and you're looking at this kid's record, you're going to be, in a couple of years, looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
It may be even already looking over your shoulder, thinking, "Wow, this kid's good. He's going to be great when he gets to Formula One."
Yeah,
but like, hopefully it translates. It could. You see other drivers who get to Formula One and the step is just so much higher.
Yeah,
that they struggle like Schumacher, Albon.
Exactly with Schumacher, like that. That was the thing that punished him the most. Like, we've always seen him been successful in those lower formulas, but being a bit of a slow starter and maybe having an average season, understanding the formula that he's in, and then having a stellar season. And obviously, you don't really get that opportunity in Formula One. You get your shot, and if you don't perform, you're out, as he found out.
Yeah, we should round this sort of bit off about Kimi by just saying we should really keep an eye on him over the 2024 season at Prima.
This F2 season, man.
It's
going to be so good. Like him.
It'll be really interesting to see how he does, because that's a competitive grid still.
Yeah.
You got Behrman, you've got a bunch of others there. You got some veterans there as well who are.
Yeah.
You got your Drugoviches of the world. If he's still around next year. Like, I've not really looked at. For next year.
You got yet another Fittipaldi. You've got Victor Martins, who's been around a little while now.
Underestimated.
Trying to think who else there is, but there's plenty.
And then waiting in the wings,
Horger.
Hoger, you've got all these other. You got the other driver who's gone off to do Super Formula as well here and there. So they'll all be coming through in the next few years, as and when the seats become available. It could be that some of these Formula One drivers don't get their contracts renewed. We've got a big old silly season ahead of us. Lots of contracts up for renewal. It could be that they don't get renewed and they get new blood in.
I mean, as one example, Ollie Behrman, as well as being named on the Ferrari reserves this year, they've said he's going to be doing 6 FP1s for Haas this year. There's no way Magnussen and Hülkenberg are both going to be at that team the following year. Unless Behrman crashes the car 6 times in his 6 appearances, I don't see a world in which he's not a Haas driver come 2026. 2025. What year?
You just hope that it doesn't do to him what it did to Schumacher being at Haas. Because the car, I think Schumacher's reputation got torn apart a little bit by being at Haas because that car was just, rubbish. Right. It's only because the only reason no one's ripping into Hülkenberg and Magnussen is because they're long-term drivers in Formula One, and we know they're known quantities. Exactly. A young driver goes there, they're not immediately good, and then it's like, oh, they're rubbish. They obviously don't deserve their seat in Formula One suddenly. And actually, no, that's not the case. They're just an absolute abomination of a car.
I think by next year, Haas are going to be a very different team to the Haas that crushed Mick Schumacher's spirit.
Yeah.
So then Schumacher, this is interesting. Schumacher to Mercedes to partner George Russell for a while.
I think it's like a backup option essentially. I genuinely think that I feel the most realistic one is probably Mercedes trying to get hold of Albon and then getting Antonelli in the Williams to replace him, and that being some sort of like brokered deal to make getting hold of Albon easier without Williams putting up as much of a fight. I think that, something like Schumacher is a backup, but I would say that even like Sainz and maybe even Ocon are probably ahead of Schumacher in that list. Like,
I would say so,
and they're not first choices, I don't think. Like, I mean, I don't think Sainz would be a bad driver for Mercedes. He's not the kind of driver that causes problems, rocks the boat, anything like that. And, you know, we know he's capable of kind of fairly putting his point across without it being like a dick move. Like, he's very good with Ferrari of saying, this is the wrong decision, do this for me instead, like, without being an arse about it. So I think he'd fit into Mercedes quite quickly and quite easily. And, you know, I think he'd be able to do a job for them. He'd be able to score them regular points. Like, he is very consistent, but I just think they prefer Albon, personally.
Do you know, do you want to know my conclusion through all that? I mean, we've got Vettel written down here, but can you see Vettel coming back?
Yeah, I've seen people mention Vettel's name. I can't see him coming back.
Not sure. I think if Antonelli dominates F2 next year, then why not? Why not just drop Antonelli straight in there in 2025?
Yeah. In which case, maybe Schumacher for a 1 year deal would work for them.
Well, it's going to be. Well, no, we're talking about 2025. You wouldn't need that. You just drop Antonelli.
No, I suppose you
wouldn't,
would you? No, of course, you just drop him straight
in.
Yeah. But I guess the problem they have is this market's going to start moving really quickly. So if they wait to see how Antonelli does, it's already going to be too late for most of the other drivers on their list.
Well, Antonelli's still got to prove himself in F2, though.
Yeah. But that's the thing. If you get halfway through this year and Antonelli's
everyone
not living up to the hype, every other driver's been snapped up. At which point, I guess it probably would be Schumacher because there'll be no one left.
That's nice to have, right? It's nice to have a reasonably good, because your number one for that year is going to be Russell anyway. Yeah. So you might as well chuck Schumacher in there. You know, you're probably not beating Red Bull in this era even now, unless they have an amazing season this year and you know things tighten up drastically. Then let's be completely honest: Red Bull are the ones to beat. They're going to show up to testing and going to be very, very quick with another evolution of an absolute monster of a Formula One car. So I would be very surprised to see anything other than the Red Bull at the top of the timesheets during testing and in Bahrain for the first race.
Yeah.
These next 2 seasons are kind of like placeholders for the big rule change coming up in 2026. Exactly. If you can get a young driver in there in 2025 and get him used to F1 before the big rule change, before all everything gets changed all over again, then at least they've got some seat time in Formula One. They know the crack. They've got, they know how the forces are going to work on their body. They've got the fitness level ready for that potential championship charge in 2026.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally agree. One thing I enjoyed the other day, going back to Albon, was the rumour mill suddenly started churning this story around that Red Bull had offered Albon a new deal to secure him and take him off the table for Mercedes, which was swiftly followed by, that's definitely not true. There's a pretty good chance it was Albon's team who started that rumour to try and get Mercedes to look at him.
Why not? It's funny, the games that they play, isn't it? The games they play are so funny. So Sainz, we want to talk about Sainz.
So obviously Mercedes is potentially an option for Sainz. If you were him, would you take a risk on going to Sauber for a year, knowing they're about to become Audi?
I can see that being a very logical option for Carlos, because there's already a family connection to the Audi Sport Group in that Senior does a lot of the Dakar stuff with the Audi e-trons and stuff like that at the minute. Yeah. So there's a connection there. And I honestly would not be surprised if the breaking of this news, or maybe even already, maybe this is why contract negotiations were, not going smoothly with Ferraris, because Carlos has had Audi in his ear. And he was like, and there's a two things here. Like, Carlos is playing Audi want me to go be part of this works team when that kicks off for 2026. Like, give me a good deal, or that is what I'm going to go for. And they're going, well, we're talking to Hamilton. Like, they both got like, I've got better options. What are you going to do about it? And ultimately, it's going to pan out the way it is. So I feel that is the most logical option. That's why I don't really have him being a big part of this Mercedes. Like, I think Mercedes will have him on the short list, but I think Sainz he put out an interesting statement after all the news broke that, like, I've already got something in the pipeline. Like, as in, like, my fans, don't worry. I've already got something. We're working out the specifics, and I will announce it soon. Especially because got a suspicion that's Audi.
Because he's clearly been frustrated at Ferrari about only ever getting short-term deals, which is why him to Mercedes, I think, would surprise me a little. I think I can maybe see a wholesale change at Sauber next year. Bottas and Zhou both out, and Sainz and Pierre joining.
Yeah, Pierre could be a good shout for a team.
Sainz is there, ready for the Audi era. Pierre, see how he gets on, I guess.
Yeah.
We're in for the silly season of all silly seasons.
Oh, it's going to be wild. I did see some reports that Aston Martin might be interested in Sainz, but I think that would rely on Stroll leaving. I mean, maybe they're thinking it's time to sidestep Stroll into WEC. I don't know.
Again, just back to Audi, I think Bottas Sainz is a pretty good lineup for a brand new Formula One team.
It would be.
Yeah.
But I also think they've semi-promised Pierre a seat.
Well, it means nothing. Like, whoever they promised, whatever, none of it means anything until it's all signed, sealed, delivered, and you're there at testing, sitting in the car doing.
And say until you're in the car.
Yeah. And even then, sometimes.
Well, I mean,
look at
Piastri. I don't know if that's what you're going for, but
maybe Oscar Piastri, but no, I was going to say look at Nick de Vries. A few races in the car, and suddenly he's out on his hoof. So,
oh, sorry, you mean like even being in the car's not a guarantee? I was thinking more Alpine thinking they'd got a contract with Piastri and him being
and that.
No,
it's another example.
You haven't.
It's a very valid example still.
Is there anything else kind of driver market related that you have thoughts on off the back of all of this?
I can't think of anything.
It's hard to put a finger on, but just because there's so many contracts. I mean, without seeing the list, I think it's like half the grid have got a contract. At least probably more than half the grid have got a contract coming up at the end of 2024. I think when you look at, I would say the simple answer to this question is, or the simple question we should be asking is, who is the most at risk of losing out and not getting a drive for 2025 on the Formula One grid? So you've got your Lance Strolls, your Esteban Ocon, your Sergio Perez's, those kind of drivers who I think potentially could be possibly reaching the end of their careers in Formula One.
Yeah,
would you say?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think Sargent needs to have a huge turnaround in form this year to keep his space. I think Magnussen might be in trouble. Magnussen's last couple of years haven't been very convincing.
I think out of the two, Hülkenberg's the one that, based on like recent form, you would probably keep Hülkenberg of the two if you keep one of them. Of the two,
I'd keep Hülkenberg.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? We're having this conversation now about 2025, and we haven't even started the 2024 season yet. This is how mad this is how much this Hamilton stuff has turned the world up.
Just shaking everything up.
I mean,
Hamilton, the musical reference for you there.
Happens.
I enjoyed
it. It happens like probably once a decade or something. There's like one big contract, and it just kind of it ripples throughout all the teams to some degree, because that's a big seat move, and there's suddenly a big seat free, and it just kind of sends ripples. Like, I mean, obviously Rosberg retiring last minute was a good example of like, who are Mercedes going to put in this seat? What effect does it have? And like, obviously Bottas, then it has an effect on Williams. And like, it's that kind of event again, I think, where you've just got a very unexpected, sudden gap on the grid, and a lot of contracts that are coming up for expiry at the same time. Like the 2025 grid is probably like, we've gone from a grid that basically looks almost identical to the way it started last season with little to no movement going to 2025, he's going to be unrecognisable in comparison to.
The grid at the start of the season this year is exactly the same as the grid at the end of the season last year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
2023. So
It's just
you
different.
you could argue, obviously,
difference.
De Vries is the only difference. You could argue that it's the same grid as last year.
Yeah.
From the midpoint of last season. So yeah, it's very, very static. But I think this Hamilton stuff has just absolutely. You might as well put every driver into a bag and just draw numbers out.
Yeah.
At this point, there's just no way of telling who's going to be other than your really, really big names like Verstappen, who signed up to Red Bull to something like 2027 or something crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Leclerc is obviously I mean, this is another thing. Like, it explains like the devilishly deceptive, like crypticness of what Ferrari were doing with Leclerc's project, with Leclerc's contract, because they just said multi-year deal and were really cryptic about it and never really committed to how long, or didn't, were really, really secretive about it. And this must be why.
Yeah.
They don't want anyone to know how long. Well, they don't want anyone to know how long Leclerc's contract is, because they want to be able, if Hamilton does an amazing job there, they want to be able to get rid of him and put Behrman in there or some other junior, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. But yeah, you're right. Like, beyond, obviously we know the two Ferrari seats, Verstappen's going nowhere, Russell's going nowhere. Beyond those four drivers, I think everything else is up for grabs.
Yeah.
No, not even Alonso. Like, even Alonso,
Alonso's
Aston Martin, I think could change. I don't think I can see Alonso going to Mercedes, but you also can't rule it out.
You can't rule it out.
I think that would be a bit too chaotic for Mercedes, to be honest.
Yeah. Crazy.
Anyway,
right.
Should we talk about Andretti?
Yeah, the news that this conveniently for Formula One managed to bury.
Yeah. So the short version is, after FIA approved their application, Formula One, FOM, have rejected it. They released a pretty lengthy statement of all their reasons for it, which definitely had the air of, we had already decided we don't want them. Here are the reasons we've subsequently come up with to back up the decision 100%. We had already made. I mean, should we just kind of go through the main points they made and chop them to pieces?
Yes. Let's try and make it quick.
Yeah. So the main points they came up with. So they said they didn't believe the presence of an 11th team in general would provide value to the championship.
Value? What kind of value? Define value.
They didn't opt to do that.
Okay.
One of the definitions was...
Chris, you be the FIA and I'll be the rest of the world.
FOM.
Sorry, FOM. Yeah, sorry.
FIA.
Oh, God, sorry. You be FOM, I'll be the rest of the world. Go.
The most significant way in which a new entrant would bring value is by being competitive, in particular by competing for podiums and race wins. We do not believe that the applicant would be a competitive participant.
So that means, and that also means no new team ever then. Ever.
I mean, it also eliminates...
Why did you let Haas in the first place? Why did you let...
It eliminates 2/3 of the current grid. If you're going to say not being competitive means you're not adding value...
Yeah, if that's the metric, if being competitive is the metric, then why are all those other teams at the bottom?
Insert other team here there.
Yeah. Part of like the idea of a world championship is you have people who are competitive and you people who are not competitive, who are less competitive. And what tends to happen is the people who are more competitive tend to beat the people who are less competitive. But everyone is competitive on some level. So to say someone isn't competitive, it's not. Do you only want people who are just going to be fighting for championships to be entering? Because that's not a realistic expectation.
No. Like,
what's your next point, FOM?
I suppose they're alluding to like the Caterham, HRT kind of Virgin era where you had 3 new teams come in and they only competed with each other and no one else. But I just don't believe that would be the case again.
But they were still competitive. They were competitive with each other.
With each other. But
exactly.
The whole problem with that is they gave them that bag of absolute garbage of a Cosworth engine.
Well, yeah. Speaking of engines,
speaking of what? Sorry.
Speaking of engines, that brings us very nicely to the next point. The application includes an association with General Motors that does not include initially a power unit supply, with an ambition for a full partnership from GM in due course, but this will not be the case for some years. The need for any new team to take a compulsory power unit supply, potentially over a period of several seasons, would be damaging to the prestige and standing of the championship.
So what about all the cars running a Mercedes engine, and what about all the cars running a Ferrari engine, and what about Minardi running a Red Bull powertrain?
Like right
in
now,
partnership
we have
with Honda.
10 teams and 5 power units on the grid.
There's a Mercedes, a Ferrari,
Mercedes, Ferrari, Honda,
and the Honda and Red Bull powertrain, I guess.
Yeah, and Renault. So there's 4 power units for 10 teams currently.
This doesn't really make any sense. So, like, having an engine from an existing supplier is not an option. Is
detrimental to the sport.
So why is that in the rules? Why put it in the rules if you're going to then decide it's detrimental to the sport?
Yeah, it's in the rules. It's your own rules.
Next point. 2025 will be the last year of the current regulatory cycle, and 2026 will be the first year of the subsequent cycle, which we know. The applicant proposes a novice constructor to design and build a car under the 2025 regulations, and then in the very next year build a completely different car to 2026 regs. The fact that the applicant proposes to do so gives us reason to question their understanding of the scope of the challenge involved.
It's just patronising garbage.
If they hadn't taken so long to, I believe that Andretti are in for 2026 season.
Yeah.
Andretti themselves have said we had no intention of ever entering for 2025 for this exact reason.
Yeah. And they're talking about a team that builds like Indy cars and stuff. Like, they're well aware of what it takes to build a race car. Yes, Formula One is a different rule set and a different set of challenges, but the fundamentals are the same, right?
To play devil's advocate, Andretti do run in a lot of other series where they are very successful. They are primarily more spec series than Formula One. So that's fair. A difference. However,
there is an argument to say if you're getting a chassis supplied, an engine supplied and all this stuff, and you're just putting it all together.
When they never intended to do 2025 anyway, like...
Yeah. They originally, I think, were going to do 2025, but then because this process became so long and drawn out, they shifted their focus to 2026.
Yeah.
And they've clearly already got we've seen like wind tunnel footage of what looks very much like a current Formula One car. So they've already built that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next and most insulting point on this list: while the Andretti name carries some recognition for F1 fans, our research indicates that F1 would bring value to the Andretti brand rather than the other way around.
Well, what about Visa Cash App RB or whatever that is?
Minardi, Stu. Minardi.
What about
anyone?
What about Aston Martin? What about Mercedes? What about Ferrari? What about, people only know who Ferrari are. Ferrari and F1
because of their history in Formula One and racing.
Yeah, it's their history in Formula One. Of course, F1 is going to enhance. That's the whole point of sponsorship. Like, Formula One wouldn't be successful without any of the sponsorship. That's ridiculous. That's just so dumb. That's just literally the opposite of the way the world works.
The only team I think you could make an argument that they bring more to F1 than they take from F1 is Ferrari. And even
even then they're neck and neck.
Barely. Yeah. Ferrari ultimately are still at mostly in F1.
There's even a phrase. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It just doesn't
Absolutely
fly.
Ridiculous. What on earth? Like, what planet are they living on if they expect every team that comes to them to bring value to value to Formula One? That makes no sense. Who on earth could possibly do that? Who do they want to
not
join?
to completely crap on Williams specifically, because that's not the point I'm trying to make, but who knows Williams outside of Formula One in the grand scheme of things? Like,
no one.
If I spoke to somebody who is not interested in motorsport, even someone who is interested in motorsport but not Formula One specifically, they quite likely don't know who Williams are. They probably know nothing about them, don't even know there's a team called Williams. The names that they know for Formula One are names like Ferrari, Mercedes, because they're car manufacturers. That's it, basically. Yeah. They don't know who Alpine are, and Alpine are a car manufacturer. Like, to say, I would guarantee you that more people in the world probably know who Andretti are than Williams, and I think that I wouldn't be far off 100%. With that. Because
I think so.
Of the broadness of, like, I mean, maybe in the 90s it was different. Williams was quite a big name in the 90s. You got like the Clio and all that kind of stuff. But in this day and age, I would say more people know Andretti than Williams.
I don't even think even in the 80s, Tom. I think that's such a specific reference. There'll be people listening to this who won't know what a Clio Renault was. A Renault Clio Williams was.
Yeah, the Williams Special Edition Renault Clio.
Yeah, and it was if you don't know what that is, look it up. It's a weapon, but I dare bet half the audience listening to this won't know what a Renault Clio Williams model is.
Yeah.
I also bet half the audience wouldn't recognise an Alpine road car if it drove past them.
Probably. Well, I mean, I've never seen one on the road.
And that's not an insult. No. That's not an insult to the audience. That's not an insult to the audience. That's just
it's just like
a reference to the fact that Formula One raises awareness. Formula One's job is to raise awareness. As far as Mercedes are concerned, Formula One's job is to raise awareness of their brand. That's why they join. So to say that if you are a manufacturer of cars and you want to come to Formula One, you better bring brand value to us, is basically to saying we're not interested in you and your independent Formula One team. We're just not interested because there's nothing you can bring to the table for us. The point of Formula One is to help. Formula One was invented to help people who make fast cars sell their fast cars to the public.
Mm.
So they're just this comment is backwards. It's completely lost sight of the whole reason d'etre for Formula One.
I think there's another angle that this comment is quite insulting on as well, is basically the bit where it's like, while the Andretti name carries recognition for F1 fans, our research shows that we don't give a crap what they think, because the fans might want it, but the potential newbies that we're trying to sell to through Netflix don't give a crap. So we're not interested in having them in the sport, whether the fans want it or not, basically. Like,
and even that,
the core fan base, they're admitting that the core fan base, no Andretti, want to see them on the grid. They've literally admitted that in the statement, and then gone, but we don't care about that because, we
have our own opinions.
Ridiculous.
This whole thing feels like it's been written by like some Karen who's just got beef with Andretti for even wanting to.
Yeah, right. Like,
they've just got some vendetta against
the way Andretti have gone about this application has very much been coming into this like pre-existing club and shaking things up, and I think he's upset a lot of people by doing it that way. And I think a lot of the tone of this comes from that.
Yeah, I agree.
They also said that we would look differently on an application for the entry of a team into the 2028 championship with a GM power unit, either as a GM works team or GM customer team. What they are declining to acknowledge in that statement is that the next Concord agreement is due to come into effect in 2026, which would give them a nice opportunity to write into the Concord agreement that it's a maximum of 10 teams and then just shut the door to anybody else. Which I would not surprise me if that's what they tried to do at all.
This has got anti-cartel lawsuit written all over it, all this stuff. This is the thing, really sketchy now.
Andretti have obviously said they're carrying on as if they're going to get an entry and work out their next move. The FIA have said they're going to be having discussions with FOM about this. But if Andretti take this to either the EU or UK courts, I just don't think this rejection is going to fly. Like, this rejection essentially says you have ticked all of the boxes of what we asked for in application, but
we just don't.
We've just decided we don't.
Yeah, we just don't like you.
I just don't think that's going to fly if it ends up in the courts.
No.
Another fun detail was that, it is. It's exactly
ironically when they're saying that they want them to be more competitive, they're being anti-competition.
So you can't be competitive unless you're on the grid. Like, give them the opportunity to compete, and then we'll find out how competitive they are.
Yeah. I mean, this is why there's a cost cap, right? The cost cap was brought in to stop the issues of those failed 3 teams that we talked about at the top, the Hispania, Virgin / whatever else they were called, Manor at the time, and Lotus / Caterham as they were known through their time. So like that was not the sole reason for the cost cap, obviously, but that was brought in to essentially kind of try and pin the high performing teams back a little bit so that those new teams could come in and know, right, nobody can spend more than this unless they've got a huge catering budget. So so they're easier to get on par with. Like not like you're going to just come in and start winning, but it's easier to get up to speed and try to be competitive, like for podiums and stuff. Yeah.
Another fun detail that came out of this was that as part of the statement, FOM said we invited Andretti to a face-to-face meeting to discuss this, and they never responded. It sounds like
that
what happened was
sound true.
They sent an email inviting them, an email which ended up in a spam folder or something and wasn't read, and then FOM just didn't bother following that up. They just assumed Andretti were ignoring their invitation rather than actually follow
childish.
It up, and
That's
then use that as part of their rejection.
Yeah,
that's the strangest. Oh, actually, I read about this. It was like you'd expect that email to come probably from Stefano, right? Like,
or like somebody
that email,
somebody within that.
Apparently, it was sent by someone else, and that's why it ended up in a spam folder because it wasn't like a trusted account. Because let's be completely honest about this, it's perfectly possible for that to happen because these companies are so secure and there's so much industrial secrecy around them that they have crazy secure setup. So of course, if someone emails you and they're not on your contact list, it's a high likelihood that it is going to just end up in a spam folder.
It's just come from Stefano@hotmail.com, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like sending from his personal account, like, whoopsie.
F1 entry at gmail.com.
Yeah. Congratulations. You have won entry to F1.
Yeah. Click this link to enter your card details. Don't forget the Concord agreement. It's 2 million euros. Or however many million euros. Hilarious.
Like,
it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think they realise... Do you think they don't realise how much this is damaging their reputation, or do you think they just don't care? Yeah, because this has got every F1, or the vast majority of F1 fans, this has really annoyed them.
I'll give you a hypothetical scenario to think about to answer that question. Bernie Ecclestone era or this? Which are you taking?
Bernie Ecclestone all day. I'll take Bernie over this.
Like,
this is crazy.
So this statement, when I started reading it and had to give up because of just the audacity of the things that they're saying in it, my instant thought and people thought Bernie was bad. Like people will want Bernie back at this rate. Like those were the immediate thoughts that started going through my head.
Like they have done so much good for the sport in the post-Bernie years and built up so much goodwill from fans. And it's like they're now just trying to speed run destroying all of that.
Well, that's because it's a different management team now, isn't it?
It is. Like this.
I don't think the top brass in. Go on, Chris. Sorry.
I say this on top of like street tracks filling up the calendar that nobody wants and all of that stuff. Like it's just. It was easy to feel like the people in charge cared about the sport and what the fans wanted, and I think that was true for a while. But it's just doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
Yeah. So who is at the top now? Like Ross Brawn's not there anymore, is he?
Ross Brawn's not there. Chase Carey's not there.
Chase Carey's not there.
Chase Carey's like
is not there. I don't think.
A non-exec.
Yeah.
Chase Carey's somewhere around, but he's not like a running the show. He's like a non-exec or something. I think the most significant person, to my knowledge, is Stefano Domenicali. To my knowledge, I don't know who else.
I don't like, and I've thought this for a long time. I don't really like what Stefano Domenicali's doing at Formula
I don't
1
either.
And what he's doing with it. I think we are sort of lurching back into the Bernie era with Stefano. To be honest, I think he's the same sort of. I think Stefano Domenicali might even think he is Bernie Ecclestone. The way some of these things are being operated, and just the falsehoods that seem to come from the top of Formula 1. Like everyone loves sprint races. No, we don't. Like the Formula 1 fan base, speaking at large, really dislikes sprint racers, and yet he's just always banging on about how much we all love them. We don't love them. Most of us really, really don't love them. So think of something else. But, he just says whatever the board want, what he thinks the board want to hear, I think.
Yeah. They just... They apply their opinion or decision to everything with no regard for what anyone else cares about at the moment. And I mean, I would probably say that as much as I liked Stefano when he was part of Ferrari, this era of FOM being an issue, like we give the FIA quite a lot of stick for things on this podcast, but there is a very clear distinction when, this is not... The FIA were ready to have Andretti come in, essentially, weren't they? They've signed everything off. Yeah. Like, this is Formula One management. And sometimes I think the FIA gets stick for things that are actually FOM's fault, or whatever they're calling themselves now, like Formula One Group, whatever it's
Formula One, it's just Formula One Management, FOM.
But this is one of those things where I think people just need to be 100% clued up on this is Formula One management that are screwing Andretti over, not the FIA, because sometimes the FIA do get blamed for things that aren't actually in their control. But this like kind of downhill slide of the FOM situation that I was kind of getting to originally, it's probably started over the last 2 or 3 years, and that is the time that Domenicali has been in charge of it.
Yeah.
It's in, like you say, it's in most of the big hitters that were running it early doors and like bringing these new innovative changes to it to improve things. They're pretty much all gone. Ross Brawn officially like kind of re-retired and doesn't have anything to do with it anymore. I think that's probably a significant loss for this kind of committee, let's call it, that run the sport.
It felt like it was in responsible hands when he was around, and now it just feels like it isn't anymore.
I mean,
but I think, I think what you touched on a moment ago with the FIA, people hating on the FIA and people sort of kind of being behind FOM. I think what's happening here is Andretti are getting caught in the crossfire between the FIA and FOM.
Possibly, yes.
This is not a letter written to have a go at Andretti. This is a letter having a go at the FIA for approving Andretti without prior consultation of FOM. That's all this is. We all know Andretti are perfectly capable Formula One team who probably wouldn't be like amazingly competitive straight away, but if they're in it for the long haul, then I'm sure they could quite quickly work their way up into competitiveness because they're such a powerful motorsports team. It's the fact that the FIA have approved this before FOM have, and FOM are basically throwing their toys out the pram saying you can't approve anything without our say. That's what this is. That's exactly what this is.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a cold war brewing between the two sides for a couple of years now, and this is kind of... This feels like this could be a bit of a spark that like really pushes that relationship to breaking point, and
I think so.
I don't really know how that's going to play out, but Andretti are definitely seems like they're the kind of
and let's not forget
party stuck in the middle.
For FOM, Formula One is rented off of the FIA. It's not owned by FOM. So really, I'm sure there's lots of complicated contracts and all kinds of like clauses and this, that, and the other that give them sort of stewardship over the sport. But ultimately, the ownership of the sport does rest with the FIA. Whatever you think of the FIA, whatever you think of Ben Suliam and all that, it is, it's the FIA's sport, not FOM's sport.
Yeah,
that's why we follow the FIA's rules.
Yeah, like the Formula One World Championship is the FIA's property, and that's not going to change.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Should we quickly do the last couple of questions in the inbox before we wrap up?
Yeah. Sure.
I suppose we should do the jingle.
Oh yeah, sorry. all this has just distracted me so much. I've kind of forgot what we're supposed to be doing. Sorry.
Keep it saying now. But stay out. Box. Hey, man.
you want me to the first one because it's quite a long one and I've pre-read it, so I can
go for it
and get the points. So Blaze 2010. We did promise we'd talk about Haas at the top of the show, so this is the Haas section. So Blaze 2010 says they fired Gunther, the only likable part of the brand. They promoted Ao Komatsu, who was head of trackside, which is a bit of a nothing move unless he has the people skills that Gunther lacked. They also promoted Andrea Di Zordo from chief designer to technical director, who replaces Simone Resta, who were both throwaways from Ferrari downsizing. And the last 3 cars they designed don't say good things about their value. You might have seen that Komatsu basically said that they're going to start at the back of the grid this year based on kind of the preparation. So, yeah, the question is, are those comments fair? Has been riding Ferrari's coattails and picking up scraps for 4 years now, and they don't seem to be good ones. Will he be able to actually do something about them starting at the back? I'm not sure I entirely agree about Gunther being the only likable part of the brand.
Yeah, there's Magnussen's daughter. It's always a nice sight when he comes and plonks her in the cockpit.
I mean, it's very honest of Ao Komatsu to be like, yeah, we're going to be terrible at the start of the season. Like, he's preset expectations as low as they possibly could be set.
Maybe it's a strategy. Maybe the car turns up and it's blistering.
I mean,
the look on Stu's face as I say that, I just like, no, Tom. No.
Yeah, like, I want to believe that they promoted him to that job because they think he'll be able to do it, not because he was the easiest and cheapest person to promote. But with Gene Haas, who seems to want to just exist in the sport, spending as little money as possible on it, I don't know.
I mean, it's a great. Well, let's just go back to the value aspect of being in Formula One. Formula One's a great place for Haas to be, because being in Formula One means that they get eyes on all of their tool creation tools for their main target audience, which is, you know, really, really high tech, high precision production companies that need really, really, really accurate tools with really, really high tolerances. So, you know, Haas are getting a lot of value for Formula One. So it makes sense for Gene Haas to want to use his marketing tool, which is Formula One, and get the best possible price for it without, you know, spend as little as possible and still have that presence. Yeah. So, yeah, they do get a lot of value out of Formula One, do Haas.
And that's
but what value do they bring to Formula One, Stu?
Absolutely none. They run around the back of the grid and they're there. They're the 10th team on the grid.
Yeah. And I don't have much faith. I think regardless of who the personnel are there, I just don't have much faith in them being anywhere other than, if not at the back, towards the back. I just don't.
But the
see
thing
a
is,
version
like,
of Haas that
when you look at it through that lens, right? When you look at a Formula One team through that lens, how and you take out the position on the grid, how are Haas any different from Mercedes? Because that's all it is to Mercedes as well. It's just Mercedes pack a lot more punch, put a lot more money into it because they want to win. They're using it and wanting to win, but at the same time, it is just a marketing tool for them. It's not. They don't need to be there.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Gene Haas has multiple times said as much. Like, I am in this sport because at the point we joined it, it was a fairly cheap option. And it gets lots of eyes on my brands. Like, that's why he's there. So, yeah, I can't see them being anything other than that anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah. At risk of maybe slightly validating Fom's point about bringing value to F1, I think Fom probably do need big brands like, you know, like Mercedes, like Ferrari, like Audi, to maintain their status as like the premier place to be for motorsport, you know. But at the same time, like you're never going to have a series that's made up entirely of huge brands like that, because there's just not enough of them in the world with the desire or the budget to throw at it. You have to accept that there are going to be teams that maybe aren't necessarily, you know, huge powerhouses in global economics that are going to want to have a team there. That's what the sponsorship, that's what the sponsorship slots are for. So, the whole thing. I mean, my point here is just I don't really mind what Haas do. They bring what do Haas bring to the table? They bring 2 more cars and 2 more drivers and 2 more competitors to a grid. And that's what we want to see. We want to see good drivers, good personalities battling it out on track. Surely that should be like the priority.
Yeah, absolutely.
A full grid should be the priority, right? Like 26 cars, I think they've got space for.
Yeah.
For now. That should be the priority. Yeah, as of 2026, they're going to change it to 20, aren't they?
Sure.
That's stupid.
Yeah. The other one, Jay Valles sent in, so removing the limits from of what's plausible, if you could have any living F1 driver that is not in real contention for the seat next to George at Mercedes, who would you pick? Personally, would go with Kimi Räikkönen, just because why not? So what do we think?
On that basis, so living F1 drivers, they don't have to be necessarily on the grid right now. They just have to be alive and have been
someone who has been in the sport at some point and could legitimately return.
Martin Brundle.
finally get a win.
Still give him a mic so he can commentate on the races.
While he's doing it.
I mean, he's good at that. He is good at commentating on what's happening in a car whilst driving it fast. So
Jenson Button.
I mean, I think everybody who listens to this show knew that's where I was going before I said it.
I think it would also be a great time for Mika Hakkinen to finally come back from his sabbatical.
Yeah,
he's technically still on.
Yeah,
Alan Prost.
Yeah,
there's a part of me that'd like to see Vettel come back for just a swan song year, but in reality, I can't see it going well.
Jacques Villeneuve.
Definitely not Jacques Villeneuve.
No, come on, shoot.
Right. Should we wrap things up at that point in time?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us for this podcast that wasn't even planned a couple of days ago, but Lewis Hamilton changed that. Yeah. We're sort of in car launch territory. We've already had 2 livery launches. We've not really touched on them much. Once we've had a few more, we'll do our usual, giving them a proper discussion and a ranking and stuff. So far, so meh from what we've seen, but hopefully there'll be some more interesting ones. We'll be back soon with some of that content. If you want to send us questions and stuff in the meantime, you can find us in all the usual places, Facebook, Twitter, all of that stuff. If you'd like to get involved with our Discord, you can go to patreon.com/backthegrid and you can find out how to do that. If you watch us on YouTube, don't forget to give us a like and a subscription while you're there. All that stuff's extremely helpful. And I think that's all the things. So thanks again for joining us, and we will speak to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.